And how has restorative justice been applied locally here? Have you seen any efforts locally in Harrisonburg and the area?
There have been a variety of local programs. There was one, some of them still continue in a small scale. There's one at the Fairfield Center that I think is still going. It was started by 2 CJP students many years ago.
And most of the time, the stories of victims, people that are affected by the conflict, are not on the table.
Not there.
Yeah, and I think one of the projects we're working on is Congo Voices, where we want to raise the voice of Congolese people that are victims of the conflict, the ongoing violent conflict and wars that exist in Congo for over 3 decades. How do we bring those stories? And that's what, when I was reading about your work and saw that storytelling was also important.
Stories are how we learn. You know, I had a colleague when I was teaching college in Alabama, I used to complain. He'd say, you know, the only thing my students remember are the stories I told. Well, that's right. That's how we remember things.
That's a good thing.
And so stories are just really fundamental for how we learn, how we communicate, and how we create our identities.
And I wanted to read this quote for our viewers. The quote says, "I've always tried to be a good sport when I've lost at something. And I see no reason not to leave this world with the same policy." He says, "After all, it was a hell of a battle. I therefore congratulate all those who have tried so hard to murder me. I definitely have to give them credit, as it takes a very special kind of a person to murder an innocent man and still be able to live with themselves." Welcome back to Road Talk, where we explore journeys and insights from very inspiring people. And remember, at the beginning of the year, we've been recording videos of very great people in our communities, people that have very tremendous leadership accomplishments, and people that we want to learn from, grow from, but also understand how that feels to be in their shoes. And so today we have the esteemed privilege of receiving Professor Howard Zehr, who will be sharing more about his insight. I don't have enough words to explain how much he's been able to do in the last couple of decades, but we have that esteemed privilege. And for me, it's a more privilege because it's one of my biggest interviews that I would do for this year. Professor Zehr has been very inspirational for me, looking through what he's been able to do, looking at restorative justice as a program as a whole, and reading through some of the books that he's been able to write, and his understanding of justice beyond punitive and punishment, but more in terms of needs and the victims, but also the people that committed crimes and how the relationship can be rebuilt. From my understanding, that is something that usually the legal system doesn't look at. They look at more how much we can punish, how much this person deserves in terms of punishment, versus how much the victim, the person that has suffered from the wrongdoing, feels, and what are the needs of those that have been suffering from the consequences of the wrongdoing. And so we're going to unpack all of that, including his own life and experience and journey, and some of insights from some of his books that we'll be exploring today. And so welcome, Professor, to this interview.
Thank you.
It's a big privilege, as I said. And I can't thank you enough for having some time to discuss with me and with our viewers your journey, but also your life experience. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And the first question that I have for you, in your book, Changing Lenses, you discuss the fundamental shift from retributive to restorative justice. Could you share what inspired you to challenge the prevailing justice paradigms and how your early experience shaped your belief in the need for this paradigm shift?
Well, I first got involved really in a hands-on way with crime and justice issues when I was teaching at Talladega College in Alabama, which is a historically black college.
Yeah.
I had graduated from historically black college, and then I was hired at Talladega. And I got involved with a colleague and students in helping defendants and working with prisoners and so forth. And I really thought I knew a lot of what was wrong with the legal system. I saw how many times innocent people got charged. I saw how racially biased it could be. I never thought about victims. I never, like many advocates, that just wasn't part of the equation for me. And then I moved to Indiana, where I was directing a transitional house for men coming out of prison, which burned down. And there was this new idea in the community of bringing victims and offenders together. And my board thought I should do that. And I thought, I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to work with the system. I knew nothing about victims. But it didn't take very long until we brought victims and offenders together and saw what happened, that I realized I got to rethink everything I know about this. And that's what led me on this path, really.
Well, and did you think that was a big need? Was that the reason why you wanted to do something about it? Oh,
well, in those early days, and I wasn't the first one that thought about bringing victims and offenders together.
Yeah.
But in those early days, we didn't have any big theory. We had no term restorative justice. We had no big theory. There was really three concerns. We were concerned that victims were being left out of the legal process, and they were not only being left out, they were re-traumatized when they were included in it.
Yeah.
Secondly, that people who caused harm were being punished, but they weren't understanding what they did. They weren't taking responsibility. And the community was being left out of the whole thing. In fact, the community was being disempowered by that. So those are the concerns that led us to do these things in the early days. But then when I started doing it, I realized the implications were much, much bigger. And that's when I began to write about it, found this term restorative justice stuck away somewhere, and thought that sort of captures what we're talking about.
In your recent work, Restorative Justice, Insight and Stories from My Journey, which I've been trying to read, and you reflect on how restorative practices extend beyond the justice system into a broader human interactions, how people come together and interact. But could you tell our viewers how these principles can be applied in everyday life and the transformative impact they have in people's lives and journey, especially those that face the legal system today?
Well, when we started this, we were working with the criminal legal system. We were trying to solve deficiency of that. But people began to catch on pretty quick. This had a lot bigger implications. And many people took it in many different arenas. School applications are some of the biggest today. But I kept hearing from people that this changes the whole way of life. And I couldn't figure out for a while why they were saying that. I mean, we were just trying to solve a problem in the legal system. And then I began to realize that it's a set of principles and values that restorative justice espouses that is a kind of way of life. It reminds us that we are in relationship with other people, that we're responsible in those relationships, that people are due respect. It reminds us to take responsibility for our behavior and its impact on other people. It reminds us that the importance of people who are harmed and the needs that come from it. So there's a whole set of things that came to be seen by some people as a kind of philosophy of life that came out of restorative justice.
Wow. And in your work, you've been emphasizing the importance of storytelling in restorative justice. And why storytelling?
Well, our identities, our sense of who we are in our stories.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned is when someone's been victimized, they need to talk about it. They need to tell their story in many cases, because they're trying to restory their life. They're trying to take that terrible thing that happened and not just push it out, but incorporate it somehow. And so we often talk about the need to restory our lives when something like that happens. So stories are how we learn. I had a colleague when I was teaching college in Alabama, I used to complain. He'd say, the only thing my students remember are the stories I told. Well, that's right. That's how we remember things.
That's a good thing.
And so stories are just really fundamental for how we learn, how we communicate, and how we create our identities.
Yeah. In part of the work that I've been doing is bringing the stories of those that are left out. And especially in peace building, what I've been seeing is that there could be a lot of organizations trying to build peace in certain areas or help transform, conflicts in different places. And most of the time, the stories of victims, people that are affected by the conflict, are not on the table.
Not there.
Yeah. And I think one of the projects we're working on is Congo Voices, where we want to raise the voice of Congolese people that are victims of the conflict, the ongoing violent conflict and wars that exist in Congo for over 3 decades. How do we bring those stories? And that's when I was reading about your work and saw that storytelling was also important. And I've always thought that, storytelling is important because then we get the authentic voice of those that are affected.
Yeah.
Then it's not translated, it's not adjusted or, trimmed to meet a specific need. Yeah. And I was talking to someone who was saying, we went to do an interview of some of the beneficiaries for some of the NGOs. And we ended up seeing that some of these NGOs were focused on specific aspect of those stories. They would tell people, hey, could you say just this? We want to capture this specific part. And there's more to it. People have things that are very important to them that they want to share, but those are not usually captured. And so I appreciate the fact that you use storytelling, or you look at storytelling as a big factor in restorative justice. But one of the things that you've been doing in your work, you're addressing the challenges of confronting deeply ingrained social issues like racism, sexism, and also classism within the framework of restorative justice. What do you see as the most significant obstacle to address these issues through restorative justice?
I don't think I'm the right person to answer. There's a whole generation of restorative justice advocates who came after me who are much farther along on this. And some of them are using other language. Some of them are talking about transformative justice, for instance, where they see that taking the next step to helping communities solve their own problems, live together, and so forth. But I think it is the reminder that everybody deserves respect, that we are in relationship, we exist in relationship to other people. We have responsibilities from that. I think that those core principles that I call the 3 R's take us to a lot of those issues that you talk about.
Yeah. And so with your work, you've been living in Harrisonburg for a long time. How did restorative justice really connect with CJP? I'm assuming you're one of the people that started talking about restorative justice here, specifically CJP.
Well, I had gotten involved in justice and what came to be restorative justice in the late 70s. And then I worked for Mennonite Central Committee as a director of their National Crime and Justice Office for, 14, 18 years. So I traveled the world really helping communities start restorative justice programs. And when this program, CJP, was new, they knew apparently they needed a justice component. And so I was recruited and I started, I think I taught my first class the first year this program existed. And then I came in 1996. But they realized they needed a peace building approach to justice. And that's what restorative justice is. It's a peace building approach to restorative justice. So there's a compatibility between peace building, peacemaking, and restorative justice. The two go hand in hand very closely. And so I was brought in 1996. And so I've been here most of the time.
Wow. And how has restorative justice been applied locally here? Have you seen any efforts locally in Harrisonburg and the area?
There have been a variety of local programs. There was one, some of them still continue in a small scale. There's one at the Fairfield Center that I think is still going. It was started by 2 CJP students many years ago. I was teaching a research class, and they did a project interviewing people in the community about justice, and out of that came a restorative justice program. So there's been a small program here for a long time, but there are many all over the world, as you know.
Yeah. I think one of the summer class I was taught by someone from Canada. It was a restorative justice class in this Summer Peace Building Institute, and it was interesting for me to hear that there are restorative justice programs even in Canada and other places, not only in Canada but throughout the world.
Well, it actually started in Canada. The first case that led to all this was in Canada.
Wow.
And the Canadians took this a lot farther. Their justice system's not quite as hard to crack as ours is here in the U.S. So they've taken a lot farther. But yeah, it is in most countries in the world have restorative justice programs now, of some sort or other. It's clearly an international phenomenon.
Wow. You've been a father, a husband, a grandfather. How has restorative justice informed your life, your family, your experience?
Well, in several ways. For one thing, I often feel like I don't live up to it. In fact, when I was writing Changing Lenses, I wasn't sure I wanted to do this because I knew that I failed in so many ways. So most of us don't fully practice what we preach, even if we want to.
Yeah.
But certainly it's an important part to live with that kind of integrity. Remember that I'm in relationship and all those things I just talked about.
But as someone that has been doing this a long time, restorative justice or justice or peace building in general, what are some of the ways that you've seen the system or the restorative justice field itself improve, grow? Have you seen more creative ways that people have been engaging in restorative justice?
Yes. It has gone places I never imagined.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first wrote Changing Lenses, I thought people would laugh at it. Yeah. So I was really surprised when the idea took off the way it did. But people have taken it so many places that I never dreamed of. There's so many different applications, and there's a whole new generation of people excited about it, taking it, addressing all kinds of issues that I never imagined. I mean, in the last couple of years, I was consulted a bit with the Smithsonian's Museum of American History. They have a Center for Restorative History, where they're trying to address the wrongs that museums have created and give voices to groups that have not had voice given, and write policies for other museums. That's exciting stuff that I never could have imagined.
That is exciting. And I don't know what approach practitioners should take to take restorative justice to other places where it hasn't been. Like, I know there are probably some cultural component to restorative justice in many places. Like in Congo, for instance, growing up, many issues were dealt with in the community and not much in the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, there have been more legal systems and more, justice system involved and more punishment involved. But back in the time, it was more elders coming together and helping circle process and things like that.
One of the things I learned, and partly by traveling, but also by teaching here, was people coming from so many traditions, that restorative justice in many ways is what people have done traditionally. And kind of combined with modern human rights sensibilities. But what really excited me when students come from Africa or they come from Pakistan and those kind of areas and go back and use restorative justice as a way to legitimize and call forth the traditional system, bring it up to date that was there. And that's happened a lot. So, but my African students connect so easily because they often just say, well, that's what our elders did. I had one story I tell. We had a student here from Rwanda who had lost his family in early years in Rwanda, and he had remarried a Rwandan woman. He was taking CJP while he sort of reclaimed his life. And my assignment in class was to go explain restorative justice to somebody who doesn't know about it and see what happened. So he decided to tell his wife, and she just started laughing. And he said, "Why are you laughing?" She said, "You came all the way over here. You're paying all this money to learn what every African already knows." And I think that's, it resonates with so many people. The legal system was part of colonialism. It went around the world squashing functioning conflict resolution systems in various cultures in the name of, modern Western legal system. And it's a control device. I mean, it wasn't an accident that it went along with colonialism. It's part of the way colonialism was imposed. And so it's really important that people can go back and find those parts of their traditions that work for them.
Wow. And part of this book, Restorative Justice: Insight and Stories from My Journey, I was reading it, and I got to page 136 or 137 and read a story from Tim Baldwin. And I wanted to read this quote for our viewers. The quote says, "I've always tried to be a good sport when I've lost at something, and I see no reason not to leave this world with the same policy." He says, "After all, it was a hell of a battle. I therefore congratulate all those who have tried so hard to murder me. I definitely have to give them credit, as it takes a very special kind of a person to murder an innocent man and still be able to live with themselves."
Yeah, those are the words of Tim Baldwin, who was on death row at Angola prison farm when I met him.
Yeah,
many years ago. It's some of my first prisons. We haven't talked about this, but I've been also a professional photographer, and part of the way I've tried to help people share their stories is with photographs and interviews. But he was one of the early people that I photographed. That his attorneys had asked me to do that, him and some other people, and got me access. But a friend of mine who was a journalist investigated it, and he's convinced that Tim was innocent, that he was basically framed by police. It was before this big. We've had many exonerations now since that time. Yeah. People found were falsely accused and so on, but this was early on before that movement. So Tim died, but I think too he was innocent.
Yeah, this sat with me since I read it, and for him saying it takes a special person to murder someone that is innocent, and live with that, and that's what I think it applies to many things. It takes a special person to be able to stand, and face someone that did wrong to you, and face that conversation or try to build some reconciliation around that.
It does, yeah. It's difficult.
This work has been powerful.
It has.
I mean, and we thank you for all that work that you continue to do. Of course, now that you're not doing much of that, but it's been an unfolding and creating many generations of restorative justice practitioners, and even programs that teach specifically restorative justice people has been powerful. I hope that continues. Do you as a person think that you've done what you needed to do at this point?
I've certainly turned it over to others. I've watched too long people hold on to things when they ought to turn them over to others, and that's what I've tried to do. So I'm trying to be retired and letting other people take it, and they are doing it. They're scoring it all, as I said, all kinds of different ways. It's very, very exciting to watch.
Yeah, thank you so much. And what else do you do besides from, now that you know you're retiring? What do you do? I know you've taken, and that's something that I remember when my daughter was born, my first daughter. We came to CJP to get portraits, photos. And I think that's a photo that most of our staff have, those photos. And it was like a few days after my daughter was born with my wife. And these were not only great pictures, but the reason behind taking these pictures is what is powerful. We don't pay for that, but you just want to connect with people and hear a little bit more about them and their stories while taking pictures of them. And so why pictures? Because I know you have a book that has portraits of the inmates that are on death row.
One on lifers, I have one on crime victims, I have one on children whose parents are in prison.
And one on trucks.
And one on people in their pickup trucks,
Pickup trucks. Wow.
And a new one that came out in Lifers 25 years later. There's a new book came out 2 years ago.
Wow.
I went back 25 years later and photographed some of the same people, interviewed them. A book called Still Doing Life.
Still Doing Life.
But yeah, I miss it. I'm hoping we can do it again, but I used to have a studio where the offices were here at CJP.
Yeah.
And I offered to do free photographs for students and faculty. And it's partly a way to learn to know them. I mean, that's how I met you. But some of those have actually even turned into job connections and various things. But that's a way to make connections. And I love interacting with people during the photograph. I love doing portraits. So I'm hoping we can find space and I can do it again here before too long.
Wow. The other thing that I want to ask you is, how do you see the world today compared to when you started in the field of restorative justice or in peace building in general? So what has changed?
Oh, I wouldn't know how to start. I mean, when you look at environmental crisis, which when I started, we were barely aware of.
Yeah.
In those days, in those early days, we thought we had such a high incarceration rate, and we didn't have any idea how high it could actually get. It's it's a bigger problem than it was. The political divide is so much greater. The cultural divide, so much greater. Yeah. So we have some real challenges. I mean,
more challenges to face and come up with solution. I feel like people should come closer more and think beyond what divides us or what makes us different. But think about what we have in common as challenges and issues, and how we can resolve them in connecting resources. Usually, younger people do not have access to resources. It's been a challenge. As a founder of a small nonprofit, youth empowerment work and peace building, what I saw is that most of the time we don't have access to resources. Yeah. So we have ideas, we have great minds that are able to do things, but getting the access to the resources that allow these things to be possible or easy becomes a challenge. And so even those that want to work in the restorative justice field, I wonder how much resources they have to be able to really further this work forward as much as possible. But that has been one of the things that I think has been a challenge. The new generation, we have more challenges, but we have fewer and fewer resources to face these challenges. And I think, I'm learning as much as I can. How do we empower people that have less resources to do good and do what they know how to do, but also what we can do as a community to help each other to face these challenges that we have today. And I don't have the answers.
No, I don't either. The internet has provided opportunities and also real challenges.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, what is your go-to place here in this community? If you want to go somewhere, a specific place just to relax or clear your mind, what do you do?
Well, I enjoy my home. My wife is a native plant gardener, and we have, you've seen it, it's a wild kind of yard, and we have a screened-in porch where we can sit, and so that's a nice, and then I catch up with people. We like to go to coffee shops and things like that, and so, but I'm not traveling much anymore. I turned 80. We're in July, I turned 80, so.
Wow. You look very good.
Slow down.
You look in very good shape.
I know.
80.
I can tell I'm aging.
Thank you so much. So this is it for today. It's a great privilege to have you on our show. We learned a lot about your work again today, and I'm sure many of our viewers will find a lot of important information and elements to learn from this interview. Thanks for your time, and we really are grateful for all your work and the things that you've been able to achieve. Yeah, it's great to see you again. Yeah. And so thanks for viewing this video. Stay tuned on Road Talk as we bringing more and more episodes like this, where we not only learn, but also grow and get inspired. See you soon. Thank you.